Hello, welcome back to video 3, which is dealing with the editing within Photoshop of your photo files, but we're actually going to launch it from the Lightroom Classic. The two are interlinked, and that allows any changes that are made in Photoshop will actually reflect back into your library within Lightroom. Before I launch up, this is basically as we left off last time. There's the little JPEG that we did of that edit from Lightroom, just been renamed. One thing that is missing is my big lacy too big hard drive. It's just that it's being used for on my other Mac because I'm transferring some data over. So without ado, we'll launch Adobe Lightroom, and again it will go back to the position that I last used, which it's actually gone there because that's where it was before. Let's just take you to test 2 because that was, and in fact let's go down here. The image that we made into the JPEG was the edit, which was that one. I could launch this image into Photoshop and do other work on it, but I'm not going to actually work on this because I don't think there's enough in here to give you a reasonable demo of some of the things that you're probably interested in. So we're actually going to go back to this test, which was my first test. Let's which was unpublished on YouTube, but same idea. These are it was a camera burst through there, or camera shots. I carried out some very simple first stage Lightroom adjustments. Decided with the 1 star that we'd actually utilize that. We did also look. I'll move it into develop just to have a look. In here, I'll just show you there was no white balance change. There was a half a stop, just slightly under half a stop exposure change. Highlights I had reduced down. Shadows I had slightly increased to get some texture in there. No changes to whites, blacks. No changes to texture. A little bit on clarity, which kind of gave that a little bit more punch, and similarly on the vibrancy. And as I come down, nothing on sharpening. This is a preset on here, so every photograph has that. No noise reduction as well. This was shot at 320 ISO, so you're not going to get really any noise reduction on that, noise interference on that at all. And of course the lens adjustment on there, which is the must do for anyone. There is a slight rotational change that I've done on this, just so that this line through here is nice and parallel with the frame, and that is about as much as we actually did on that. Looking at the plugins, forget all the coloured ones. One thing we was looking at is the use of converting this to black and white, and this is just really as an example. So the one I think I was kind of really interested in was this punch one. In fact, I made a virtual copy, so we'll go through. I'll click that, you can see where I haven't actually readjusted this. You saw the shift on it. This is really nice in the center here, and I quite like the way that what's there in the background that I can work on. But the one thing I don't like about it is just that because of the high contrast, that the mirrors have just turned white. If we actually go back to our original color, again you see that little shift. There is a hint that there's some blue sky in there and a bit of cloud. Not a great deal in there. I think that was mainly white cloud, but the hint of a bit of blue in there. So what we're actually going to do is take this image, and we're going to put it into Lightroom and into Photoshop, and do a wee bit more to it. So right click, come down here where it says edit. To the right there it is, edit Adobe Photoshop to 2002. Click that off and it will actually start to automatically load. You can see down at the bottom here the jumping PS icon where it's activating it, and it's actually I've basically got both programs running at exactly the same time, and one will talk to the other basically, and whatever final changes we make and we save in Photoshop will update the catalogue. So that's what's happened here. We've got now our image out of Lightroom into Photoshop. It's still a raw image. It always put, for those that haven't used Photoshop, it's actually made it in as our background image, and really we want to maintain that as our background image. If I was to take the little eye and turn it off, we would, which we can't do because it's background image, so you have to have that. Sorry, I forgot about that. What you could name that whatever you want. I quite like background image because that means that's the starting point. Sometimes it might automatically come up in Photoshop, depending what your settings are, as layer 0, something like that. The naming of it you can always rename anyway if you wish. As you can see, it says layer 0 there. I'm going to cancel out on that. So we're not going to really change on there. It's almost a locked layer that we know that we can always come back to. So right click and you'll see coming down here it says duplicate layer, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take that and make a new copy of it. I'm going to leave it as background copy. I will change the name of it, but I'll change the name that's appropriate to what we've actually done on it, so I know. So that's now our active layer. If I was to click on that, that would be the active layer, but let's get a few more layers in there and I'll show you how something being active and not active is. So it's turned grey because it's active. Everything's being seen at the moment. What we're going to do is go up to filters and we're going to open the camera raw filter. That's going to load up and create a completely separate window. Now that this is has very similar attributes to the editing tools within Lightroom, but works in a slightly different way. But again, what we've actually done is we've done those first little edits in Lightroom, and they have now become the default 0 points. So everything I'm going to do now, I can't undo what I've done in Lightroom, but I can change what I've done. And one of the things I just wanted to try and look at, I don't want to change the exposure because although these two wing mirrors are the things that I want to kind of change, and the idea of this is to move it into black and white. Probably what we need to do is actually reduce those highlights, and we've already reduced highlights and I've now reduced them right down. But as you remember looking at that black and white punch filter, it was pretty contrasty. So although this is matted down, that punch filter will probably bring it all back. So what I wanted to try and do is get some something in here. Now obviously that one's really quite nice. This one is virtually all cloud with a hint of blue in it. Possibly can do other things with that if we need to. So I'm going to be quite dramatic on that. Obviously for a black and white, for a colour one, it's made it look like a cloudy day, but it doesn't matter. We're not after a colour version. I will slightly lift the shadows because we've taken the highlights out, just to get something in here. I'm not going to change the clarity because it's pin sharp and there's a nice structure in it, and I want this to be as soft as possible in the background. I will try a little bit of dehaze. That's the wrong way, that way. Yeah, it's not, the trouble is it's dehazing everything, and again if I go to max, you know, although I can see this sky and those wing mirrors, it's not really what I'm after. So again, like everything, to get it back to 0, just double click it, should be there, and it goes back. Not changing vibrancy because I'm not really thinking about the colour. I was using this first tab, which is the basic adjustments tab. It still has the similar things as you saw in Lightroom, where we can change white balance, but we would have already done that. Wouldn't necessarily have changed it in here. Here is the curves layer. Again, we're not going to use that, but yeah, you could play around further with that. Sharpening, noise reduction, not going to use that. And color adjustments on here, which we're not going to worry about. And split toning, not part of what we're doing here. Lens correction, well, we've already carried out our lens correction, so we don't really need to do anything on there. The FX on here is the any graining or vignetting. Again, we're not going to do that. Wouldn't do it at this stage anyway. Might be a very last activity. Some more colour calibrations, which again we're not doing. And then the final one is actually your filters, and similar setup to you saw on Lightroom. You've got some standard ones in here, plus we've got some of our night collection ones in, but we're going to go straight down to black and white. So we were looking at landscape, which, yeah, although it's good for the wing mirrors, it's the mirror in the wing mirrors. The rest of it isn't what I wanted. High contrast is just bleached everything out in, or made everything too dark in the middle, which is the main subject. Punch is the one that I really liked. But it has completely taken out any idea of sky in those wing mirrors. If I come down and do low contrast, you'll see that in low contrast we've got the cloud effect in the mirrors, but the rest of it looks like a rainy, dark day. I actually think, because I know that one won't be any good, that's too soft, and these are different tonings which I don't want to use. I think we need to use a combination of punch and low contrast. So what I'm going to do first is activate the punch one, and I'm going to carry out no other adjustments on here as it is, and I'm going to go OK. And you'll see in here it's turned it to the black and white image. It's sitting over the top of the background. If I was to turn that off, you can see the background image underneath. For the sake of knowing what we've done, I'm just going to call that punch. Now I want to do the the low contrast versions for these wing mirrors. So again, I'm going to duplicate my background. Okay, so it just says background copy, and I'm going to go through this exactly the same again. I'm going into my raw filter, open that up. That's going to give me a separate window. Here we go. I'm not going to worry about anything else. I'm just going to come down to the back here, and I'm going to go low contrast, and I will, although we're in low contrast, I'm going to just go back to basics. As you see, it's remembered it's low contrast. That is it. It isn't. Yeah, it is still low contrast. So let's go here. Let's just see if we can reduce any more out of it. Yeah, just take a bit more of those highlights out. I think that's okay. I don't want to overdo it. Don't think there's anything else I want to change in there for the moment. I just don't want it to look like a bright white spot. We could reduce the white out of it a little bit as well, which is just giving a bit more tone in there. And I'll just try a bit of dehaze as well. Oh, gone the wrong way. Yeah, it's not making a great deal of effect. Just double click that. Okay, I think again my eye's only going to there and there. Whatever effect in there is, I'm not worried about. So we go okay. It's now converted that background copy layer into the low contrast version. So what I'll actually do is make that, just call that low. And if I was to turn punch off, you can see the low one under it. And if I was to turn the low one off, you can see the background image. So you can see how they stack together if you haven't investigated. Is the ability to be able to use parts of these two layers, one over the. It would mean that I would probably have to remove a lot of this around, and I'm only actually interested in that and that. So really, low wants to sit above the punch, and what we're going to do is just reveal that within the punch layer. So first thing we can do is down here it should come up with a layer mask, and you can see it's put it next to the low one. This is a white mask sitting over the top of that. Now to reveal what's underneath, you would have to paint it out in black and it would show up the punch underneath. But to do that, I would have to take everything out just to leave that into position. So if I reversed that layer mask to be black and we painted white, all I would need to do is actually just affect those two areas, and I'll show you how that's done. Double click in there. I think this is the right ones. Select a mask. Yep. First thing you need to do is, if you actually go invert, we're not doing any other adjustments on it, and then down at the bottom go OK. You now see that that white mask is a black mask, and it's almost kind of translucent because we're seeing punch underneath. As you can see, those are bleached right out again. So we will zoom in a bit through here, and the idea is we're going to paint use a paintbrush, and if you keep your eye over here, if I was, and we are actually in a white colour, again you can reverse that round, but we're in the white colour. If I was to paint that, you can now start to see the background coming through, and you may not see it here, the tiny little thumbnail there, you can see where it's been painted. Now obviously I'm using a hard-edged brush. I can change the size of the brush, and again, if people haven't done this before, where you've got the square brackets on your keyboard, if you go on the left it reduces, if you go to the right it increases. Now going around the edge, and even if I made my paintbrush very small, it's gonna be jaggedy. I mean, it's not a particularly good way of doing it. What we need to do is isolate that. This white area is very strong, so it should come up okay. So if I remember rightly, I think what we're looking for is I think it's here, sorry, magic wand. If I go magic wand, let's go in here. What's the tolerance on that? Let's just change that down to about 10. We'll increase that to 20. I think we can go, actually we go. I'm changing the tolerance, so it's reading, it's getting there. Slightly changed it on there. Let's go 40 and see what that looks like. As you can see, it's kind of just isolating these areas. It's quite high, this, but it's actually done pretty good. It's done a bit in there, but I'm not too worried about that because I don't see it, but it's done this really quite well. We've got a bit in the middle, but I'm not, again, we can deal with that because we're not right on the edge. So we're going to use that selection tool to now go back, pick our brush. Again, we can go as big as we want with this because I could start it over here, but it's only removing the background in where the running ants are, and now our sky is starting to reveal. Okay, the fact it hasn't done that bit isn't a problem because we do, I'll do that next. That's exactly what I was trying to achieve. If I come up to the top here and go deselect, yeah, it's taking it out. This is still active, and I think I can manage to do that without making a complete mess of it. There we go. And if we zoom out, so Alt on your keyboard will zoom out. That's what I was trying to do. The other one hasn't done. So we've ended up with something in here rather than that big white space. Now we'll do the same with this one. So again, if you can remember, we go up to grab the magic tool, magic wand, click in there. Again, it's done similar kind of thing. I'm just wondering if I was to, let's just put that to 60 on the tolerance. Try it again. Yeah, it still just doesn't like that in there. Let's try it again. No. A bit of trial and error on here. I've just got a little bit there. Let's not worry about that. Again, grab my paint brush. Remembering I have to have that this layer active, and I have to have the mask active as well, not that. That's why it's got the white line around it. If I was to click on that, the white line would move around that, and that would be unactive. And you would end up, if that happened, you would be ending up painting a big white blob over your photograph rather than removing the background layer out of there. So beware. Again, that's taken the white out and just given it a much more interesting tone, which again is what I had in mind on there. Right, we'll take the marching ants away by going deselect. There are shortcuts like Control D, but I'm tending to use, rather than using lots of shortcuts, because if what I find is people doing demonstrations, on-screen demonstrations, they're doing all these shortcuts and you can't see what they're doing, and it's much more complicated to try and replicate that. Rather than that's why I'm actually using a lot of cursor work on this rather than shortcuts. So I will now go and in fact, this thing is just go to view and fit on screen again, and that's kind of got what I want. Obviously I could do lots more work on there, but for this exercise that is fine. That still looks better than it was. So I'm just going to save that, and when it saves, it's actually saving it back to Lightroom. That's where the files are, and that's where it will be. You'll be seeing it. So we'll come out of Photoshop now, which we are just going to close the whole thing down because we have saved. Obviously you could save as and put it somewhere else, but we want to save it into our Lightroom. So we'll quit that. Remember, Lightroom is already opened behind us, and you'll actually see that this is our new edited version. I'll just click that, and you can see it's the one now with the changes made to those handlebars. If I come down, you will see that this was our original colour one. This is the black and white that we tried as a kind of an example one, but we decided we want to do work on here. So I'll bring our edit one up. I'll just mark that with 2 stars so that to remind us which one it is. Thumbnails, and it reveals it all there. So we're actually done here. Next time we'll come back to the same image and we will do some more layer masking techniques, just to give you an idea of what else can be done. So for now, I bid you goodbye.